Hello and welcome to the Lirone Glikman Show, the show that explores the human factor around business and entrepreneurship in a hybrid world. I am Lirone Glikman, your host, a global business development specialist, business relationships and personal branding amplifier and speaker. And today we will talk about something that we as professionals cannot and should not ignore to grow our career and be fulfilled. And what I'm talking about is how vital to understand the link between our growth and the technological development, especially in the age of rapid technological development and AI and all this fast-growing, innovative solutions out there. And for that reason, I invited the amazing Robin Weninger. Hi, Robin. How are you today?
Hi, Lirone. Great meeting you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. So Robin is the co-founder and managing director of GILT, which is Global Institute of Leadership and Technology. And where are you speaking to us from today, Robin?
I'm actually in my hometown in Frankfurt, Germany. It's quite seldomly that I'm here, but I'm happy to be here.
I'm really happy to have you here as well. And again, in the global world, it's always interesting to have people from different places, but people who share the same or similar agendas and values. And just before we're going to dive in, because whenever you and I talk, there are so many interesting insights that come out of it, and I'm really excited for this talk with you. But I just want our viewers and listeners to know who Robin is. So Robin Weninger is the co-founder and, as I said, and managing director of GILT. He's recognized as a leader in addressing 21st century challenges through education and technology. His work, including the Leadership in Times of Uncertainty series, which is so important, especially today, and the Infinite Organization Initiative, that has made him a sought-after speaker and educator. He delivered over 200 lectures in 30 countries, sharing insights on AI, blockchain, and many more. He holds advisory roles with organizations like the Health Foundation and has contributed to projects under the European Commission Horizon 2020. And as we said, you are coming to us straight from Frankfurt. And we are going to talk about the topic of how to grow ourselves, or maybe hack growth ourselves alongside with technology growth. So we're going to understand how technology drives human growth and the need to continuous adaptation, some strategies and tools to relearning and reskilling to stay competitive, and overcoming resistance to change and embracing innovation, which I think it's one of the most important topics to understand how to actually make it happen. But before that, I mean, your experience is wide and amazing, and you have impacted so many people. And how did you get into this world of human development with link to technology and growth?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question that probably will fill a whole episode already. But
as much as you can,
just to keep it very brief. So I have a business school background myself, and I was always fascinated with technology. It's a driving force. It's the progress that achieves so much cool things around us. And then at the same time, when you're at the business school, like talking about technology is rather superficial than interesting, if happening at all. So I was really frustrated with this fact. And when I then started my first companies in the software sector, I really saw for myself that I have a big gap in understanding the implications of technologies and how I can use them properly in developing my own business model. So I said, like, hey, why is not this part the interesting part for what I'm going to do in the future? And that's what led me into exploring technology more from this implication level. So I'm not like a tech expert in terms of like, oh, I can explain you all these algorithms and I can explain you all this fancy tech that's going on in the back end, but rather on like, what is the technology? What is it doing? How is it creating implications for our organization, for ourselves, for the way we're living? And that really got me onto this journey of saying like, hey, let's look at this intersection between leadership, which is a fancy code word also for what we are trying to achieve in business schools, and technology, and really focus on this part. And by today's standards, we are really talking in our organization about two things here. So the leadership part for us is all about the activation of a group of people or yourself towards a goal or a common goal if you're having a group. And the technology is as the new management, so to say. It's what's enabling what's going on there. It's the infrastructure that we're using to build something new, whatever that might be. And I think this is also the reason why I'm talking so much about uncertainty and ambiguity with all these technologies that are out there. many of those things need to be created first. So technologies are being developed, they are there, they have no purpose whatsoever in the beginning. And it's up to us to decide, hey, what are we going to do with all these tools that we now have? How are we shaping our world with that? How can we build new businesses out of that? How can we create value out of these technologies rather than just like looking at the technologies from a technology perspective, which I think is a big mistake in business. Many organizations are doing, just to say like, how can we use this technology rather than saying like, what if we shape a new world around this technology?
Exactly. And just any sentence you said here can, take us to so many directions because it really touches every part of business. But I pretty much love what you said about being at the academy and university and understanding that eventually you want to, it's more than that. It's more than what they teach us, which I'm sure it was a few years ago. And today there are many, people saying, okay, university is great, but obviously you need to reskill and always learn, and like it's a never ending educational world because the technology goes so fast. And with that in mind, I remember when I was a kid and we bought our first microwave or the Blu-ray or Bluetooth. And I remember that was the edge of technology. And I felt like, oh my God, I'm holding like the most amazing thing. But today, the most amazing innovative solutions are out like every few days, every few months. And the pace is crazy. And when you look at how we as people adapt to new technologies, whether it's a microwave or a new ChatGPT style solution, what can we learn from the way we used to adapt to technology in the past can teach us about how to adapt to technology today when it's so fast?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. And I think like from some of those technologies that you just mentioned, maybe some of the younger listeners would also need an explanation for what you just talked about. So the speed is definitely there. And I think it's even more dramatic when we look into certain technology classes. Like just think about artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
When ChatGPT or like OpenAI brought their first public version, everybody was like, oh, this is so amazing. This is so cool. If you're creating something with the exact same version that has been available back in the days, nowadays people say like, oh, this is total crap. And we're talking about like roughly 2 years of a time scale when this first version was available and people thought it's the most amazing thing. And now just like 2 years later, say like, oh, that was not really good. So the speed is crazy that we're experiencing there. And a lot of breakthroughs we will definitely see there. What I think is the challenge here is many perspectives here, and let's start with this education perspective that you just brought to the table. So I think that one big mistake we're doing in education overall is that technology, or also like science in general, is perceived as something that we're putting into a certain box that only certain people deal with. It's the same like we see at university levels, where we have there's like the science, there's the physics people, and there's the engineering people, and then there's the business and social science people. So we're trying to separate people into these boxes without really looking at the intersections that are nowadays existent. So if you're just looking into medicine, for example, it's not only about knowing all the good stuff about medicine, about how the body works, how your muscles are working, all this kind of stuff that you need to be a good doctor in like a doctor sense. But you also need nowadays to be really good with data analytics. You need to be good with image recognition, because these are the tools that you're using day in, day out. And it makes sense that we have more interdisciplinary training there. It's not about that a doctor now understands exactly or can program an algorithm for image recognition for whatever kind of cancer cells. That's not what I'm talking about, but to understand the implication that it can have for their role and how they can then bring their particular skills as a layer on top of that elevates the overall experience. I think that is really critical. And we see exactly the same in traditional business roles. If you're a manager that is ignoring technologies, then it's a little bit weird. Just think about something easy as emails. And so we're perceiving that people know how to use emails. Reality is 99.9%, and this is my overestimation probably, of people don't know how to use email properly, because they are just writing stuff and sending it without having like this conscious idea of how it works. And this is an established technology. The same goes on with collaboration tools. The same goes on with a video conferencing tool. We are just like putting technology in the front of the people and say like, yeah, just use it for whatever you've done before, without rethinking really how can we do now things differently, probably. How can we be more efficient with that? How can we make sure that people are happier with that? Because it's never like this 1+1 = 2 equation with that. It's a more complex world that we're looking at. And that's where we need to really rethink what kind of skills we need. If you look into recent studies around AI and the workplace world, the majority of senior executives in businesses predict that their role in the form that it is existing nowadays will be at least partially replaced by technology, or even fully replaced. And it's over like 60% of people that are saying that. And at the same time, if you're looking into the skill profiles that we're recruiting for right now that are in demand, the exact same executives that see their roles being replaced report that they believe that over half of those skills won't be required in the next years because they will be available in different kind of forms. Is this overambitious? Maybe, but we're seeing this progress, and we're seeing that with AI tools. I don't want to go too much onto this AI hype because everybody's talking about this, but I think it's a really, really, really pragmatic example. It's a liberation of some skills. So if you can't draw, or if you couldn't draw a picture in the past, now you can create it with AI. Is this now better or worse? We don't know.
You can download your thoughts and make something else create what you're thinking about. It's crazy.
Correct. And all these tools are helping us with that. You can use ChatGPT now as your business coach. You're just transcripting something, putting it in, and say like, hey, give me feedback onto that. And it's apparently pretty good. And if you ask professional business coach, they will say, yeah, this advice is actually not that bad. It's probably not perfect, but we're progressing there. So from a skill perspective, to come back to this part, I think we need to, on the one hand side, appreciate way more this interdisciplinary approach. And I think a good starting point for that is actually curiosity. So being curious of the world around you, what is happening there, what is developing. It's a little bit like when you look into sports. If you want to do a lot of different sports, it's good if you know how to run properly. It's a basic skill that brings you into many different kind of areas. The same, I think, is applying in the world of curiosity. So if you're curious, you can go into many different disciplines. And if you then combine this with some kind of critical thinking and some human skills of connecting with people, then I think you have a pretty solid foundation to develop yourself. Because I think it's not so much about like what the education system is telling you what you should do, but rather that you have like this curiosity, this critical thinking, and the social interaction within yourself, because then you will explore yourself. And
I have to say that these are some of the skills that university teaches us. I mean, how to have critical thinking, how, to look at things from different directions. So maybe that's one of the best things that I can share. But when you shared the example of email, for example, and it just made me think, because we all use email. And similar to when I teach business networking, I said that nobody has ever taught us how to create relationships that will lead to results. Same as no one has ever taught us how to use email in a proper way, or how to, as you say, we're presented with new technology that maybe you can press here and there, but how to really utilize that to maximize the results of connecting with people, of harnessing other people to do things you want to do. And usually, we're copycats, right? Like I see what you do, then maybe I use the same wording, or I try to learn. But I think it all comes down, as you definitely said, to curiosity and maybe even more guiding and people like yourself. I mean, what you do is really helping people to think this through, and then the next time I'm going to approach a new technology, I will maybe think of it differently. But when you're saying about being curious and again being open to critical thinking, I made a little research using ChatGPT about the early adoption of ChatGPT around Germany, US, and Israel. And the data was pretty interesting. I mean, in Germany, it says that around 50% of the population, on average, heard of the AI tool like ChatGPT, but only just maybe much less are actually using it. In the US, about 23% of American adults have used ChatGPT. And they said in Israel, it's probably one of the leading ones because it's more of an innovative or early adopting country. But with that in mind, what do you think are the biggest challenges of individuals in adopting those changes as they come so quickly?
Yeah, that's a big challenge that we see. Like, how do you make things adopt? Because you need to create value first. And there we have already a problem because many roles are not necessarily defined in a way that they are creating value.
Mm-hmm.
And we have created a lot of artificial jobs that are actually not really needed anymore. We have seen the first wave of realization there when we had the unfortunate pandemic years that basically made virtual and meetings and home office and all these kind of things pretty transparent, or changed the perception of how work can be actually done. These days, just like talking about like most European companies, there was this perception. You wake up in the morning, you drink your coffee at in the bed or in your kitchen, go into an overcrowded train, go to an office place that you don't really like, sit there on a desk for 8 hours, and then return back. So that was like how we had like work organized, right? It was a physical activity to go somewhere to do something and then go back. And then all of a sudden, a lot of jobs could be now done remotely. You could do them wherever you are on this planet. You could do them all with Zoom calls or Microsoft Teams or whatever you use as a tool. And it was much easier to self-organize all of a sudden. So people could connect throughout the organization with the right people at any time, at any place, without the need of actual having managers being involved into that. And one of those really interesting first feedbacks I had at the very beginning of the pandemic was from a CEO from a large German company. And they was like, hey, Robin, what's really interesting is all the time I was in all these meetings and had to like guide people and work with stuff. Now people are just connecting, and I have the feeling I'm not needed anymore in these meetings. What do I do now? And this like was like really interesting to see, because like, yeah, this tool gave you some kind of like self-organization capabilities. And we tried back in the days, we tried this with like SharePoints and all this kind of stuff, but it was still like, it felt a little bit artificial. If you had a colleague in a different office, you weren't really connected with them. Now you're connecting all around the world at all different kind of times with all different kind of people. So I think sometimes it needs like this major, big, in this case, dramatic situation that leapfrogs us in a certain way, that gives us like this level of being uncomfortable to try something new. Because most of the time, preserving what we have is much more comfortable. Because otherwise, it's exhausting. Change is exhausting, and if we're not seeking this change actively, and we're never trained for that, by the way, we're always trained in most educational institutions, not necessarily to change something, but to rather to stick to something that is working. We're always seeking like these best practices or whatever, and best practice requires someone else figuring it out before, right? If nobody has done it before, there's no best practice. So doing something completely new that nobody has done before is uncomfortable, because it also requires you to have an environment where people are open to that, where you have positive leadership that is progress seeking, and where it's not about blame management. You need alternative career paths for that as well. So there's a lot of complexity around that when it comes to adapting something new, where you don't know, or where you can't predict necessarily what the outcome is. And we know from cognitive science and from all the biases that are existing in our heads, if we don't know what to do, it's better to stick with the default option, which is doing the things the way we did it before. And a lot of young people that are just starting their career experiences, at least to a certain degree, really early on, when they have like this idea of big change and trying to implement something new, someone else will cut the line and say like, calm down, we're doing this a little bit different. And then they're demotivated there. Another thing that I think we shouldn't underestimate here is the complexity that we're experiencing and the information level that we're having. So nowadays, and we just mentioned emails, we're texting, messaging, WhatsApp, all the time we're getting flooded with so many information. And we know also there from cognitive science that we have too many decisions to take every single day, from minor ones to bigger ones. So we are cognitively.
How can we get rid of that?
we're cognitively overloaded, and so it's just too much to take this decision. And then it's like, And then someone like me comes around the corner and says like, oh, as an executive, you should also know something about blockchain. You should know something about AI. And have you thought about quantum? How about robotics? Blah, blah, blah. It's too much. And then at the same time, these roles are designed not necessarily to collaborate and to have like a swarm intelligence of like different kind of people. Because it doesn't mean that you need to know everything about all these technologies out there. You don't need to know about all these implications. That's not necessarily your job, but you need to be connected with the people and have these meaningful dialogues where it comes back to the human relations, where we can have a conversation about different opinions and different matters, and then also change my own opinion based on what I'm learning. Still, we have this. I don't know why we even have this, right? That like, if you're learning something, that this is not necessarily perceived as something good, but as something bad or negative, especially when you're high in a hierarchy in an organization, where it says like, how can our CEO, how can our managing director, how can my leader not know these kind of things? So these people will never admit necessarily that they don't know. So it's better to just come up with something randomly that is just like protecting myself rather than just maybe, hey, I didn't know that, but this is great information. Let me think about this and come back next week.
Because from what you're saying, you talked about certainty and uncertainty, and how can I make some certainty, some solid foundation in this, uncertain world of trying new things, needing to know so many things. I don't, as you said, maybe I'll choose one path, but I don't know where it would take me. So what would be your recommendation to create some kind of certainty in this very unstable, ever evolving world that we need to deal with?
Yeah, I think like certain certainty is probably a dream that is really hard to achieve. But I think it's good to like. I think the first thing that we really need to have is being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So appreciating that there's uncertainty, that we don't know all the facts, but that we can probably work towards that.
Yeah.
And this is where it comes to working with information. So are you having an opinion on something, or do you have a plausible argumentation for what you're doing there? And a good friend of mine, Alyssa, she's always talking about like decision insurance, and I really like that, because I think that is something that really helps. So can you ensure your decisions to a certain degree by being factful, by seeking evidence around the things that are happening? Because we see that we have quite a lot of ambiguity in our world, not only through the uncertainty and the ambiguity of the world itself, but also the way data and information is presented to us. So every information that we're receiving is intended or has an intention in a good and a bad sense. So, and if you're not filtering this out, if you're not being clear about, is this intended information working towards my goal or against my goal, then you have a problem. Is this information presenting something to make a political point or a decision point that is actually in the interest of someone else? So do I need to filter that? We can manipulate with data. We can say the right thing, but saying actually the wrong thing at the same time.
Yeah.
So being clear about that, ensuring your decisions, making sure that the information you're working with is validated and plausible and explainable, and you can rely your decision and say like, yeah, but my decision was based on this particular piece of information. I believe that was right. And then you come back and say like, oh, but actually it was wrong. Then you know at least where it comes from. So this makes you a better decision maker, and then hopefully creates also some kind of certainty, or at least perceived certainty for you, because you can always come back to this point and say like, but this piece of information I took and this helped me. And now it's wrong, so I know where I need to work better in the future. And I think it's totally fine. Mistakes will happen. It's part of progress. You do something, you will figure out it works, then you continue doing that. If you figure out it doesn't work, great, because then you know at least what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And you just need to pivot your way of doing things.
Exactly. I mean, from what you're saying, on the one hand, we need also as leaders in corporates, or again, CEOs and founders of startups, that we will get things wrong and we will make mistakes. And it's also about, cultures who are more risk averse and less risk averse. If I take the Israeli tech, like every person who becomes a startup founder understand that he might fail. And I mean, it's not encouraging failure, but it's okay with you failing, but hey, you've had a company. Whereas I know in Asia and also in Germany, for example, it's less risk averse, but we all understand we'll make some mistakes. So I think that's one thing. And the other thing is what I like from what you said now is really about trying to change the conversation and understand that opinions and decisions, like how to differ between opinions and decisions. So with that in mind, can you like give us some kind of guiding questions for me as a leader when I come to share a decision or share an opinion? What would be some of the guiding questions I can ask myself before coming to my team, like as you said about using the facts and so on?
Yeah, I think questions are the most powerful here for sure. And I think there's not like this, like, oh, ask always these 10 questions and you will be good kind of set. There's frameworks out there like critical appraisal and stuff like that you can work with. But I think it starts really one step earlier. And this is like, you should be really clear of what you actually want to do. So what's your goal, your objective, whatever kind of word you prefer here? Because if you don't know where you want to go, you will end up everywhere, right? And every piece of information you can, in the retro perspective, you can always come back and say like, oh yeah, that's not what I wanted. Maybe you wanted to go somewhere else, but now you're there and you say, yeah, but I wanted to go here, right? It's you're cheating on yourself basically.
Yeah.
So what you really want to make sure is in the first step to say like, where do we want to go? What do we want to achieve? What is the outcome or the impact, depending on how you're designing that. So I think that's really important as a first step. And then really looking at the things like, I think you can never go wrong with a why question. I think why is a good question to ask in any case. But I think what is even better is a what if question, because a what if question challenges you also to come up with alternatives. So it requires you to think what might be a good scenario or what could be a potential scenario. So if you're having a scenario and say like, hey, what if we do ABC instead of XYZ? Then you already created alternatives that you can discuss with. And then you should also make sure that when you're working with a team, and I think that's a really important point that you mentioned here, it's not like it's me doing something, it's a team effort or a collaborative effort. It's like really to also challenge the peers around you to say like, hey, what could be potential scenarios from your perspective? Not just asking for like, what do you think could be, but also like, what do you think can't be? So that we're anticipating different kind of scenarios based on different information and then come to conclusions. It's really helpful if I'm just like asking you saying, hey, what do you think about scenario A? Right? That's a good question. But what's also good if I have all your answers, like, hey, what would be your arguments that your answer to my question is completely wrong? How would you prove yourself wrong? And I think that's also something that we could appreciate more in consulting. That's what I love to say. Like, what you actually should do if you have someone consulting you, let them do the job as if they would, and then take the result, go to another consultant and say like, I want you to prove everything in there that is wrong. Just like find everything that you can argue that this is not the case. And this is a positive dance because people will just change the perspective. And it's not about saying the first one was wrong or the first one produced unsuperior or like bad information. That's not what I'm saying here. It's about changing your cognitive perspectives on matters. You could even do work with the same consultant, right? Just get the results first. Say like, hey, I pay you another 2 days, but I want now a report about everything that you think in your report doesn't matter or is wrong or could be ambiguous. Find your own weaknesses. That's a good exercise.
Like the devil advocates.
Be the devil advocate for yourself. You can practice it, but it's hard work. It's really hard work to prove yourself wrong. But I think it's a good exercise to, like, if you're presenting something to your team, say like, I don't want you to agree. I want you to disagree. Could be a good way of doing it.
Would you use like ChatGPT type of platforms to do that as well?
You can certainly do that. The tools are available. You should be cautious about that, but we talked earlier about critical thinking, right? So if you're a good critical thinker, then this definitely might be helpful. Like Googling is also, we're using this day in, day out, but also the results are biased based on who we are, what we have done in the past. Exactly. So that's why we always recommend like read what's on page 5. But maybe nowadays you need to go to page 20 or page 30, which is then again exhausting. I think in general we can learn quite a lot from scientific work. So like appreciating like this scientific mindset of like dealing with information, being plausible, having good research design, being clear about the research goal, because decision making is nothing else than research to a certain degree.
True.
You
And
don't want
it's,
to do this for everything, right? Because then you're overloading yourself. But like for
yeah.
critical decisions, I think it makes a lot of sense.
And also, as you said about joining forces with your team, whether they're your peers or you're their managers, I mean, making sure people are heard. And that comes back to the relationship part in this whole, innovative advancement and all the different tools that we have. Eventually, we shouldn't forget the relationships. And I mean, we talked a lot about approaches and about mindset and again, how to go about things. But when we come to actual learning, like skills that we can keep on developing ourselves, and that might be a broad one, but what do you think, like the need for continuous learning and reskilling obviously has become more and more critical in the job market, in the high-tech market. So what do you think people should, or how should I come about to understand what do I need to learn? Because there is so many information and so many courses out there. What do I learn to become better and keep myself updated with innovation?
Yeah, beautiful question. Very hard to answer because I think it's a really dynamic
I didn't
answer
say it's going to be easy.
because I think it's a really dynamic answer
Yeah.
to that point. Let's try to break this down a little bit. Because there's like a really like, so what do you should learn today based on current research and based on current skill profiles? There's thousands of maps out there, be it from the World Economic Forum or from Skill Map. Like there's like thousands of like people say, oh, these are the 10 most critical skills, the 20 most critical skills. So you can basically Google them and then just like decide which one you want to go on and focus on. And to a certain degree, it's also role specific. So if you are having a role as, let's say, an accountant, you probably have different skills that you want to focus on for your specific role compared to someone in engineering or maths or whatever. So role-specific skills are also there. And then I think there's a third category, which I would always put in focus, are like some kind of like universal skills that you probably can't really go wrong with because they are the foundation for so much more. It's a little bit like this example that I just mentioned about like, if you want to do a lot of sports, being capable to run is a really good asset because it enables you, at least from the foundation, like the baseline of many sports. So if you can run, you can play soccer. If you can run, you can play football, you can play basketball, you can play hockey, and so on. I think you get the point. And I think the same applies to some of those skills. Certainly for me, it's curiosity, because if you're curious about the topic, you will get a self-starter. So you will see something, you will interact with that, and then figure it out. Being critical with the information provided, I think, is really good because that makes you an independent thinker ultimately. And then ultimately having conversation skills, social skills, this way you can interact with others, I think is really critical, because learning is most of the time a social interaction. And even if you're reading a book, it's a social interaction because you're reading something someone else has put into words in a way this person thinks this topic should be presented. So even though it's not really social, it has some kind of like social interaction to it. If you want to look really broad into that. The problem that we have with a lot of like these skills that are being portrayed nowadays as like the top critical skills, it's dynamic. If you look into the last 10, 15 years about like the top skills in demand, they're constantly changing. So we need to be more adaptive with that. And I think it's good to be like a little bit ahead and just like, again, where curiosity comes in, to say, hey, maybe I can be just curious about that. Maybe I'm curious about how computers work. Maybe I'm curious about quantum technologies. So quantum tech is something that we see popping up every now and then in the news, but it's not that really present. But if you see something like that, where I say, hey, so this magazine wrote now about quantum tech, maybe I read a little bit about quantum tech or watch a YouTube video tonight about quantum tech. That will already put you ahead of like 20 or 30% of the people that have heard about that or just read this one article. The same is true with like using this technologies. So if you just look into something like ChatGPT, just like stick with that, many people are using it, but very few ever dealt with how to use it effectively. It's the same like with email. Here's your email, send emails. People like I'm still surprised to this day how many people are not capable to write a proper subject line.
Yeah.
And it's a
And
core
they
of
did like
me.
thousands of those probably in during their
Exactly.
career so far. Yeah.
Exactly. And millions. So like people are saying like, oh, I have 5,000 unread emails. I can't keep up. It's like it's not your email that's the problem. It's the way you guys are communicating that's the problem.
Yeah.
How can be so much coming to your there's a mismatch between something. And to implement these kind of things, I know that there's a lot of information being shared, and I don't want to be too absolute here, but everything needs to be manageable, because if communication is not manageable anymore, you need to find a solution for that.
Mm-hmm.
You either need to accept the fact that you are not aware of everything.
Mm-hmm.
You need to either accept the fact that you can't be in the loop of everything. You can't be involved in every decision. You can't put your opinion everywhere. So you need to outsource that, because otherwise you're a bottleneck.
Yeah.
There's a good reason why we try to have inbox zero and stuff like that. It's like if you just think about regular letters, I mean, we don't receive them that much anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but every letter gets a response or triggers an action. There's basically no information letters anymore existing.
Yeah.
So it triggers something. And the same should apply to an email. If an email is just for informative purposes, then probably it's not necessary, or I can get it condensed or whatever, or I have a team report. And filtering, I think, is really, really important on that as well. So to answer your question, I think it's really a dynamic to look into that, but I think it's good to have training on some of those foundational skills. For me, it would be definitely training your curiosity, training your critical thinking, training your social interaction skill, meaningful conversations, being open to other opinions, being capable to work with people that have another opinion, which is fine, because that will lead us to progress.
Exactly.
And then I think we're pretty good on that, and everything else is then just a bonus. But
Yeah.
innovation itself, yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, as you said, once I understand that, I can, be ready to accept anything that, life or work will bring over to me. And now if we'll move more to the technical part, like you mentioned, maybe get I don't know, 5 minutes during one of the evenings and listen to quantum physics or whatever. I know for me that I usually tend to listen to or revisit different figures that I like Yuval Noah Harari or Simon Sinek. So if I'm asking you about the technical part, how can we incorporate learning in such a fast-paced life work environment? What would be the practices you would recommend to do?
So you mentioned something really important, I think, here, with like there's certain stuff that we like. So there's like this one podcast show that we listen all the time to. There's this one author that we love the books about. So this is good. Sticking with that is totally fine. I think it's important to have something that we enjoy and like and find like really cool. But it's dangerous because it also puts us into some kind of like a bubble.
Yeah.
There was a conference format a couple of years ago, and I can't remember what the name of the conference was, but they had like all different kind of random talks going on there. And there was one rule to this conference: you need to go into this lecture, and you need to listen for 2 minutes. So, and after these 2 minutes, if you don't find it interesting, you needed to listen for another 2 minutes, and then you could leave if you still don't find it interesting. But like getting into these topics sometimes is really, really important, because often we're like with this quantum physics part, for example. If you never dealt with that, if you never really had like
it's Chinese
physics, or if it's even Chinese for you, right? Then that's probably really hard for you to connect with that. But probably you can just like start with something and listen for 2 minutes. And then if you find it like, oh, I don't really connect with that, try another 2 minutes. And if you're sticking, then you're in. If not, you maybe want to go into something else. If you figure out, oh, this is something that I don't understand whatsoever, you maybe need to scale down the level. You need to go to a more basic lecture, right? If you go into like, if your first lecture is advanced quantum physics, whatever, and after 4 minutes you don't understand anything, that should be a surprise if you don't have any foundation. So maybe you go for something like quantum physics for dummies or whatever.
For example.
And start with that. And then you're getting curious into that. I personally have like one of those super cool topics that I've never thought I would be interested in is actually game design. So
Mm,
I'm not I don't play board games that much. I don't play like video games whatsoever or like card. I think, like gaming was never something that was really present
yeah.
in my life. But I had this moment a couple of years ago. It's actually quite long ago. But I was on the aircraft and I was a little bit bored. And
Hmm.
for some reason, I had downloaded a lecture on game design on my phone. That was the only thing that I had available offline. I said, like, okay,
Yeah.
whatever, let's give it a try. And I got like super obsessed with game design because there's like so much that you can learn about, like how you can design an
Mm,
environment, how you can make something engaging, how you can make something simple to play, how you can have like different kind of dynamics in a game. So I get like super obsessed with game design, and then I started to learn a lot about it, which came out of
hmm.
nowhere, right? It was, in this case, it was a coincidence, but it was really like, okay,
Yeah.
let's get started. Let's see. Oh, now it's super interesting. And connecting these kind of things is really important, because the cool thing about learning is, first of all, it will always stay with you.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
cool. And even if you don't like a topic, or if you don't find a topic interesting, at least you know that you don't find it interesting.
Yeah.
But the more of those islands you're building, right? You know, building your game design island, you have your technology island, you have your business island, you
Yeah.
have your design island, or like this bread baking island of skill. But the more of those islands you build, the more bridges you start also to connect. And all of a
Exactly.
sudden, you probably figure out, oh, if I now have my knowledge from sports nutrition, I can all of a sudden bake better bread. And with better bread, I can also
Yeah.
then improve my diet. And with the diet, I can improve my. So, like, you're starting to form like these patterns and these connections, and you can use more of this knowledge in different kind of setups. So I think it's really helpful to have like this broad interest in topics. You don't need to
Yeah.
be an expert in all of that, it's impossible. But being interested in things makes you also more interesting for other people, which is a cool side effect. Because if you have
Mm.
someone that is super passionate about baking bread, and you're just a
Hey, yeah,
yeah,
I
you're
have a
just a
tip for
starter for
you.
break. Yeah, and you start all of a sudden you can have a conversation about bread, and
Yeah.
maybe you end up with a good friendship that started with bread because you were interested in that. Because
Yeah.
the likelihood of that, you're when you're in just a very narrow focus, to find the people that are also in this narrow focus will always put you in the same bubble.
Mhm.
Breaking out of these bubbles, I think, is really important.
True. That brilliant. Everything you said is brilliant. And also the last bit reminded me of what Robert Kiyosaki said, wrote in his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that it's a sentence that actually accompanied me for many years. He said that in life, it's apart from what you really know good, strive to know little about a lot of things. And just as you said, first of all, he said it from the perspective of being able to connecting with other people, because when you know a bit about bread, you can connect more with a baker or something. But also, I like what you said about when we also as consultants, when we learn some practices from, I don't know, from working on leadership in the biomed industry, maybe we can, it just increases our creativity. We can take these practices to the sports tech industry. I mean, information can converge or can be adapted to other fields. So once you know a lot, and once you invest the time to, again, learn new skills, new abilities, and so on, it can definitely enrich your life. And you've been working with countless of leaders from different corporates from so many countries and cultures, which is so amazing. And again, I'm sure it enriches them as much as it also enriches you. But if you look at kind of a pattern or a trend, and we're seeing how leadership are being adapted to the new innovation and how they grow with the new innovative, growth pace. How do you foresee the near future, the years to come, 5 years from now? How do you think the business world, the corporate world, as you see it, will be with technology?
Mhm. Oh yeah.
It's
Well,
it's a hard one, but just what
that's it's
what do you
getting tougher
think?
and
What's the
tougher with every
trends?
question. I love that.
Tell me
I mean,
insights
like,
into the future.
sure. Um, I think like there's like this four big pillars that we really
Mm,
need to look at, and look a little bit at like how the world is doing it. So like the one is like probably the most obvious one is like how's the economy shaping. I think we have a lot of economic ambiguity
yep.
happening all around the world. Some things are yeah, well, more predictable, others are more unpredictable. If you look into like large economies like the United States, but also like Germany,
Yeah.
United Kingdom, France, China, it's a little bit ambiguous where this is
Mhm.
going and how the economy is unfolding. And then at the same time, with all these cool tools that you're having out there, is I think it's just like a question. I know that there's bets amongst big tech companies and like big tech CEOs. When do we see the first 1 billion US dollar company that is solely run by
Mm.
one person with AI tools, for example, or robotics? And I think
Mhm.
it's more than realistic to see this. Maybe not in the next 5 years, but in
Yeah.
the near future, that we have these kind of companies, which will create also like a quite interesting notion in the overall economy. Because right now, if you're looking into a lot of European
Mhm.
economies, one of the biggest challenge European economies have is demographics.
Yeah.
A shortage of talent, young people are not coming there, and then also like a lot of skilled people are moving around freely, especially in the European Union. So that if you are having a less advanced economy within the European Union, young people tend to benefit from a still very good education system in almost all European countries, but then
Mhm.
shift their work relationship to a more advanced economy. When like Germany benefited from that quite a lot in many sectors. So economic ambiguity will be certainly a thing, but then at the same time, and this is like this technological advancement, which is like for me the second pillar next to the economy is the
Mhm.
technological advancement. Is like to say, okay, if we are now finding new economic values through technology, and will we see small companies that are worth billions and making millions of revenues? I mean, like there's a lot of like tech
Mhm.
companies. If you look, or if you go into their office, you say, hey, is there really just 5 people working here and you're doing all of this and you're
Yeah.
making that much money? I mean, you have a lot of those companies in Israel, but also in the United States. And
Mhm.
so there will be significantly fewer people will probably create significantly more economic value in this scalable tech environment. So it will also shift the way an economy is functioning, but this will still raise the question, what are we doing with all the people that are out there? How, like, if you're switching from manufacturing to a more service orientated economy
Mhm.
through the technology, will this mean then for all the people out there? How do we reskill? How do we bring them into the right jobs? How do we make them curious about these kind of things? How do we make sure that, and this is the third box, that our social dynamics or the social tensions that are the result out of that
Mhm.
we manage them actively. And when we're talking about the social dynamics, tensions, I think is a big topic right now. We see this all around the world with different kind of conflicts.
Mhm.
We see them basically
Yeah.
everywhere. It doesn't matter where you are geographically speaking on this planet right now. They're everywhere. You're seeing a lot of people are being scared about the future. A
Mhm.
lot of people that are trying to protect whatever they try to protect.
Yeah.
They are in this mind set of that there is something that they need to protect, be it nationalism, which is
Mhm.
never a good answer in a globalized world where an economy is globally functioning. So, but we need to admit and need to also address these social tensions, because if people are scared, they normally do stupid things. And the more
Yeah.
people are scared, the more stupid things are happening. So we need to definitely mitigate something on that end and find answers on how we can manage the social dynamics all around the world, how we can make sure that we have only positive tensions
Mhm.
and,
Yeah.
and rather than negative tensions, and be more connected globally and as human beings, as a species on this planet, and getting rid of all this bullshit that is basically happening between human
Yeah.
interactions. And then the last one is obviously our ecology.
Mhm.
So weather is changing because climate has changed, right? It's
Yeah.
like, as someone that is loving to sail, I love weather, but I know that weather
Mhm.
is just the short-term implications of climate, right? And we see that a lot of things that are happening from a climate perspective that are having now implications on the weather.
Yeah.
We have these ecological challenges that are in front of us,
Yeah.
and I think we can only solve them again through probably technological advancements, because I personally don't see a world where people now start all of a sudden to get rid of all these pleasurable things like flying around the globe,
Yeah.
doing vacations, driving cars. So I think you can't take this away from people anymore, especially with all these tensions that we have from a social dynamics perspective. Then you create a problem somewhere else. So
Yeah.
we need to find these technologies that actually enable us to keep this level of wealth, so that we don't take something off of people, but at the same time not ruining the environment that we're living in. And I think that's a really, really big challenge,
Yeah.
especially in an environment where you have economical ambiguity. Maybe
Hmm.
technological advancements are
Yeah. It's all
our hope.
connected.
Yeah, and like everything, like the human population, or like what we do as humans is progress, right? And technology is part of that. And we have created technologies that brought us to where we are right now, but
Yeah.
they have caused problems somewhere else. So now it's about like how can we find a new setup that brings us even further, probably, but at the same time
Yeah.
also balances it out again, so that that will work out for the many people on this planet and also for the planet itself.
And everything you say really comes down eventually to leadership. How myself, me as a leader, it doesn't matter if I manage one people or I manage, 20 people, how do I bring those values and knowledge and impact? Because each and every one of us have responsibility and have power to
Yeah.
impact others. And I think that's very important. So what can you please repeat the four? You talked about economy,
Yeah.
ambiguity,
Yeah. So
technology.
technological advancements, correct, social dynamics or tensions, however you want to look into that, and then the ecological risks, or if you want to go dramatic, the ecological collapse.
Yeah,
So it's
brilliant.
if we look into the ecology, it's not really nice. Let's put it like this.
Yeah.
It starts with like climate I just mentioned, but also it's
Hmm.
like biodiversity. We have a big issue there. If you look into the oceans, again, for me as a sailor, that's something that
Yeah.
where sometimes you
Also,
really have a where you really want to cry. So if you go diving in places where you know as a child there were like thousands of
yeah.
fish and nice coral reefs and stuff like that, and now you go there and it's just basically gray. So
Yeah.
it's
And I
like
can
really
tell you in Middle
frustrating. And
East also, desert, the desert is obviously expanding and less areas for growth, to grow food. And I mean, this is something not to be ignored.
yeah,
But with all these amazing tools and practices and stories that you shared through this conversation, I want to ask you a bit about yourself. How do you keep up with your own growth, to really be able to tap into the latest information or converge or find your own creativity and
yeah.
insights? Let's learn from your practices. What do you do?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that's a brilliant question, because I think like everybody will have a different kind of approach
Yeah.
to that. But like for me, it's like I think one of the best learning resource for me, honestly, is podcasts. I think it's just great to
Yeah.
randomly go through different kind of podcasts on different kind of topics and just like listen and see like if there's something in there, and you find always interesting things there, and from there you have like basically already a good foundation to say like, okay, if I
Hmm.
found this topic interesting and they probably recommended some books, then you can go into these books and then you go into these kind of topics. I think
Hmm.
that's a really really good source. I also believe that YouTube is a really good source, or like the sessions that we're doing right now. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not saying that people need to follow everything that I'm saying, but they will find something in there.
Hmm.
There's a lot of great content being created there, and I think the biggest challenge is like really to cutting through all this noise,
Yeah.
because unfortunately there's also a lot of like disinformation out there. There's a lot of wrong information out there. There's a lot of like intended media for a certain purpose.
Hmm.
And if you're once in this bubble again, the algorithms have you. So I think like actively breaking algorithms is really helpful. And there's different kind of strategies of doing that, right? Like
Hmm.
searching for different kind of stuff that you're actually completely uninterested in, just to get into different bubbles. Um, you can be more proactive with what you're searching for. You
Yeah.
can just like not follow only the recommendations, but actively search for something that you're interested. I think what's also always good is just to follow the mega trend maps. And there's like different kind of mega trend maps out there where you
Hmm.
have like this topics
It's a
areas
good
that will
point.
that will
Yeah.
help us. There's yeah reputable institutions out there that publish regularly. I would try to find as many neutral sources as possible, and then just being interested in these topics. But I like, if in doubt, go with a podcast. I think that's always a good one. But do your homework on the people that are out there. I mean, you made a nice introduction about myself and also about yourself, but probably someone that is listening here, it might make sense to also just double check, Google the people, look what they're actually doing, what they've published, what other people are saying, because unfortunately, there's also like being a lot of misuse with information and disinformation.
So that was a good, ending to also, and I mean, it's also related to what we said earlier. Keep your critical thinking. I mean, listen to people, learn information, but make sure to filter it with your own, values or checkups or anything you need to do in order for you to feed yourself with the right information that could definitely make each of us better leaders and better decision makers and grow better and know how to use technology better.
Absolutely. And I think like probably one last point here that I think is really important, because like earlier I mentioned that leadership is all about the activation towards a common goal. And it could be like also like the activation of yourself towards one of your goals, to keep it a little bit simpler here. I think like many people have one problem or one challenge to face, and that's they don't necessarily know what they want. And there's nothing bad about that. There's nothing bad about it, because we have a whole life to figure it out, and some do it early and some do it later. It's totally fine. It's nothing to worry about. But the other challenge that comes with that is that these big visions all the time, then sometimes in our goals. So we envision us as the top athlete who can do, I don't know, 500 push-ups and whatever. But we're right now in a shape where we can't do one. So we envision us to run a marathon, but can't run 1 kilometer without taking a break. We see us as the great keynote speakers, right? And have never done a presentation before. So we're pretty good with envisioning that. But the envisioning part doesn't really lead to action. So I think like one of the best advices I could share is like really breaking things down. Making them small and making them actionable right now. If you are saying like, oh, I want to run a marathon next year, if that's your goal, then think about what can I do right now in this particular moment, the moment you're ending basically the podcast episode, what can I do, execute right now that brings me towards that? And it might be that you're saying like, okay, when I go to the coffee maker, I'm doing 5 lunges. It could be that simple as that. If you're saying, like, oh, I'm feeling unbalanced in my body, maybe you can brush your teeth standing on one leg. That's executable right now. Exactly. And this is how you're building it up. Because if we are not taking this simple micro ambitions or like this micro steps, nothing will happen. Because every step is progress. And breaking it really down, I think that's what it really boils down. It's the same with learning. Don't start with advanced quantum technology classes. Start with what is physics? and then just
use the momentum. You started, you did something. Continue this momentum.
Correct.
As you said. Yeah. So for all our listeners and viewers, right after this, what is the one simple action you're going to take towards your goal? That's a brilliant point to end with. Robin, thank you so much. It took us a while to set this conversation. I'm really happy that we did. It was brilliant and mind-opening and so insightful. So I want to thank you for making the time for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, and lovely questions that you ask. I hope I answered them as good as possible, but maybe we do another follow-up to go into more details.
we could, we'll definitely. And I can say that I'm definitely more wiser than I was an hour ago in many of the aspects that you shared. And obviously our viewers and listeners, they can also connect with you if they have any more questions or want to, again, work with you or learn more about you. Then you are on LinkedIn, which is Robin Weninger, and your website is GILT, GILT.global. Also, this information will be right next to this video. Robin Weninger, the co-founder and managing director of GILT Global Institute of Leadership and Technology. I want to thank you so much, Dankeschön, for being here with us. Thank you, and thank you for our viewers and listeners for being here on the Lirone Glikman show, the show that explores the human factor around business and entrepreneurship in a hybrid world. I invite you to subscribe to the channel, leave your comment next to this video, and I'll see you on our next show. Bye.
Bye bye.